go back again. So how do we got the independence? Because now Zeke and others in his time, we actually be the one to negotiate the power from their white master, the Europeans. And like I usually say, if we have fought there and then we drove them out, we will actually have a clear head to write our future. Now, we didn't fight anybody, we didn't drive away anybody, we basically negotiated. So,
Mm.
what kind of Nigeria was actually negotiated? Because he, as a politician, of course, an influential person, had a lot to say about it equally. Because beside, he has gone abroad, he has studied abroad, and he came home. He had a lot of influence in what became the contract. What
Mm.
is the contract? What did they understood that they wanted to do with the Nigeria that was going to be given to them?
Well, I think, to be fair to the founding fathers, the Nigeria they were born into, was a very different place from where we have now. Because then they were born into a Nigeria where you were second class citizen, where uh, the white man was your master, was superior, and then the best job you could get as a Nigerian was where some job where you served a white man. The black people were never really like getting on top of their game, were never really in charge of anything. And then in your state, in your locality, they would have like GRAs. We still have GRAs up until now, government reserved areas where the white people lived. And if you're not a white person, you could not live in that place. You could not play in tennis courts, you could not eat in their restaurants. They had special stuff. So for the founding fathers, they believe that if they can get the white people to leave, then chances are we can return to a country where we're free, where we can develop, and where we can do just about whatever we want, so far as it somehow improve the lives of our people. And because these negotiations that led up to Nigeria did not happen immediately, because when you look at a lot of the other African countries and how much time it took them to gain independence, you'd realize that Nigeria was one of the quick ones, because we started agitating almost immediately. We were never really fully submissive to the whites. We were always fighting back and demanding to have our lands back, demanding to have our resources back, demanding that the white people should leave us alone. And at a time when the white people got fed up with with all the troubles that were coming from Zeke and his compatriots, they felt okay, maybe we should just let them lead themselves. But you see, there was a problem with that, which is that they they inherited a constitution. And then of course the British weren't going to like leave. They were just not going to be in power like directly, but they had like stooges. They created the civil service. Kind of like all of the inner workings of the Nigerian government was still largely controlled by the British. As a kid, we still had like British teachers and lecturers at the University of Nigeria, and that was not a very long time ago. Some of the British missionaries that came to Nigeria 40 years ago, 50 years ago, some of them are still alive. Some have just died like in the last 10 years. So we've always had those people present. Plus, a lot of the machinery that control the economy of Nigeria. Imagine we have to have a foreign reserve. And then we're lucky we're dealing with the British, because if we were with the French, we wouldn't even be able to print our own money. We'd have the French print the money for us and then keep half of all our money in the French National Bank, if that's what it's called. And then they would have all our gold and have all our resources. But then in our case, we have all of our oil controlled by the British. We have virtually all of our resources controlled by the British. So these guys They were negotiating for a chance to rule the country. And they forgot one very important thing, which I think was that, or which I think is that the British did not come to Nigeria to rule us. And I think until the day we realize what I'm about to say, we'll never be free. The British was not interested in ruling us. They were interested in exploring the resources we have. So that when the first government was set up in Nigeria, the reason the British government gave was that they were setting up government to protect British interests. So what that means is that if in your village, the British find oil, they realize you have maybe diamond in your village, and they take interests, they will mobilize that government to protect that land and ensure that no one else but them gets hold of the diamond. So we negotiated to rule ourselves, but not to mess with the British interests in Nigeria. So a lot of times when we hear about all of this international politics, they always talk about their interests. I want to protect British businesses, want to protect British interests. And it sounds so harmless, but that I think is the biggest problem that we have. So yes, they took the deal. But if we remember that in 1966, 3 years after Nigeria becomes a federation, the first coup happens. And the coup leaders toppled the government because of the corruption in government. And then you look at the people who ran that government, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, look at Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. These men were not wealthy. Even at the time they were president and prime minister, they were not wealthy men. They didn't have the kind of money that politicians today have. And yet Nigeria was more prosperous in those days than it is today. So where was the corruption coming from? What did the coup leaders at that time see as corruption? And why would they topple a government, kill a prime minister, kill a premier of the north, kill a lot of very prominent Nigerians because they felt that Nigeria would not be free until they got rid of the people who put us at a disadvantage? And I believe what they saw was foreign interests in our land. And then they needed to remove the weak links that ensured that these foreign interests are protected. But the problem is the more they fought foreign interests, the stronger the foreign interests became. Because then our people got away from a point when they were only negotiating, okay, just protect your interests, but then just leave our people alone. To a point where we're saying, okay, we'll let you protect your interests, but we get a piece of the cake. So people get into governance today. You look at our current president, Muhammadu Buhari, has ruled over the most disastrous administration in Nigeria. He's a lot healthier than he was 8 years ago when he became our president. 8 years ago, that man was, he was really sick. He was slim. He was dark. He was bowed. He was a lot of things. But today, his children live abroad. Within these 8 years, they've gone to study in the UK. They live abroad. They work in some of the best uh, organizations in Nigeria. They make a lot of money. They serve in different boards. And the man is a lot healthier. He's happier. He looks really, really good. And then tell me, is the present salary that he's living on? No, there is something. There's a corruption beyond. There's a corruption beyond sight. Because then we think corruption is when people pay bribes and stuff, But then these British interests have got to the point where like it's crazy. So it's a lot of money going under the bridge, and no one is tracking it, no one is looking at it, no one is reporting it, but it's happening anyways. The NNPC has not remitted a dime to the Federation account in more than 1 year, and nobody is saying anything about it. This year, we're going to have a budget that is 85% serviced by debt, and our debt profile is over 70 trillion naira. And by next year, we're going to be running a budget that will be serviced 100% by debt. And no one is saying anything. you know, billions of naira worth of crude oil is stolen in Nigeria every day, and no one knows who's stealing it, and no one knows where the oil goes to.
It make one get headache when you look at those figures and you look at the extent of poverty in Nigeria, the extent at which people are living in poverty, the road and the infrastructure. They have deliberately refused to set up the minimum, which is light, because in the
Yeah,
beginning, you need to have light. If you don't have light, you live in the darkness. You just need to choose what do you want.
yeah.
You can't tell me that the government of Nigeria do not have the capacity, the ability, the intelligence to create light in Nigeria, because light have been invented several centuries ago. It is the minimum they
Yeah.
could do.
Mm.